think I'm starting to see where this is heading.
We are talking Demons at Dawn, and this is a low-budget British horror crime movie that is directed by Randy Kent. Now, Kent had previously directed the vampire horror comedy Chinese-Speaking Vampires, and this is written, produced, and actually stars Chris Sanders. Sanders was actually responsible for the movie Nest of Vampires, a movie with a very kind of similar vein to this, excuse the pun, and this is actually produced by his production company, Black Coppice Films. So he's obviously been very hands-on in this production as well. Now, okay, so this is a low-budget movie, and it's kind of a cross between a crime, kind of horror mystery film. The kind of the basic story, if you like, focuses on this hitman called Mickey, who, you know, was trying to kind of get out the game and kind of go straight and what have you, but he is coerced into taking one last job, that kind of final fateful job, so to speak, to take out this particular kind of individual. However, once we get involved in this plot, we find out there is actually a wider conspiracy that involves human trafficking, supplying demonic cults and sex, human sacrifices to kill off the various kind of demons and things. And what will happen, you'll have to watch the movie and find out. So, let's talk about what I think works in this movie. Again, I'm going to emphasise it's a very low budget, and I believe it was crowd-funded, independent movie. What can I say that works? There is a seed of a good idea here. I actually think the idea that we have organised crime in bed, so to speak, with the devil, supplying the devil and various kind of cultists and things like that with a steady supply of victims to kind of sacrifice and do nasty things. I think it's a solid idea. I mean, ultimately, there is a little bit of talk of things have to be done willingly, so it's doesn't quite work, but there you go. But nonetheless, I do think it's an interesting idea. To incorporate both a crime kind of element along with a kind of supernatural, kind of demonic element as well, which I think was quite a fun one. On the technical side, I actually quite like some of the night shoots here. Quite often in low budget films, you'll have this kind of technique where they use day shoots, like kind of regular kind of shooting in the day, but then kind of darken the screen to kind of make it look like night. And I have to say, there's a couple of night scenes here which I have to say were filmed pretty well. You know, you can still kind of see perfectly well, but you do get obviously actual kind of footage in the night, and it kind of looks a little bit spooky. They've a little bit overdone it with kind of dry ice and sound effects and things like that, but I still could have quite liked the night scenes where we have this kind of we see a sequence where these cultists are doing things. I thought that was, you know, reasonably kind of well done. And on the subject of the sound, I actually thought the sound design was quite good here. Again, a little bit overdone at times, a little bit kind of too overt, but nonetheless I quite like some of the kind of the sound designs. And what else can I say that works in this movie? It will give you ideas for some Halloween masks. Okay, you might be thinking, wow, Leo is scraping the barrel with this one, and you'd be right, because, oh boy, this movie, I like to not be too overly kind of, you know, hyperbole negative with kind of movies, but sometimes films make it so hard. You know, I don't like to kind of do these rant videos and things like that. It's just not the style. I'd rather look critically and objectively, but sometimes it is hard. Okay, where to start with this one? We do remember it's a low budget movie. Let's just kind of say that. But this movie has got so much wrong with it. Let's talk about the basic story structure first of all. We ultimately have two storylines here, because we have the main storyline involving Mickey, which takes up the bulk of the running time, but it's topped and tailed with two unrelated kind of sequences that I suspect were done in reshoots to kind of make this movie more feature length, that involve other characters that never cross over with our main storyline. and have a kind of tangentially kind of related kind of plot points, but not really. And it's clearly just kind of like reshoots and things like that to try to bulk up the running time so it can be sold as a feature-length movie to film distributors and things like that. So you have this weird structure first of all, but let's just take the kind of the main story first of all that deals with this character of Mickey. The way this sort of kind of story structure goes is as follows. Mickey goes and meets someone in a location. First of all, it's John Altman, who plays Nasty Nick in the EastEnders, a soap opera here in the UK, has a conversation. Then he goes to another location and meets Dani Thompson, a glamour model / screen queen here in the UK, has a conversation, goes to a different location. Meets another woman where he has a conversation, etc, etc, until we actually get to kind of him having a conversation with Chris Sanders' character. And that's how the kind of the plot here goes. It's very, very kind of dialogue driven. And you might be thinking, wow, dialogue driven movies can be great. Look at Tarantino. His movies are very dialogue driven. Let me just tell you, there's not Tarantino filmmaking skills on display here. Let me just say that. This movie is very, very dialogue driven. A lot of the dialogue is exposition. It's a lot of tell, don't show, and I appreciate this is a low budget movie, but sometimes you've got to kind of write around these things, and not just by having massive exposition dumps all the time. The acting is not good. Even seasoned actors, like I say, like Altman, who has done years on soap operas, really struggles here with the kind of the scenes. It feels like it's very kind of rushed. Dani Thompson as well is pretty kind of like experienced at this point. Some fare better than others, but none of it is particularly good. So the acting isn't particularly strong. The dialogue is kind of horrible. It's kind of like just lots of exposition, lots of kind of like characters who seem to sort of come out. They're introduced, they kind of are then written out of this kind of story kind of straight away, and the character of Mickey is really the only real kind of consistent one, but we never really kind of feel like we really know him. It's very kind of surfacey level, his characterization. And then we get the actual horror elements, which is very light in this movie, not a lot of them. And it's just guys in Halloween masks, to be honest with you, with some scary sounds. Yeah, it's kind of, it's a little bit comedic. I suppose, going back to a positive, you can watch this film ironically and maybe have a little bit of a giggle with it. I will say that, because genuinely this movie is, you can't really recommend it, to be honest with you, outside of that. As I've mentioned in the positive, some of the kind of the elements that I actually liked are just overdone. Like some of the kind of the sound effects here are just way too kind of like overt. We see one sequence where someone's like looking out a window, we can hear like wolves howling and things like this, and we kind of looked at other characters in the same room and we can't hear them and things like this, and it's lots of kind of like very, very cheesy kind of like dry ice and things like this. The storyline, I think, has a good idea, but its execution is pretty poor. And it's a shame, because I do think that's maybe its kind of strongest element, because it could have been an interesting like mystery that you're kind of unfolding here, but it just seems like Mickey goes to point A, point B, point C, and it's just kind of like, wow, that's literally it. It's like a kind of RPG. Go to this location, talk to this character. Go to the next location, talk to that character. It's kind of all it is. It's all that it is, and there's precious little kind of supernatural elements on display here as well. And then we have this weird kind of like top and tail section where there's other characters somehow involved in this kind of like this human trafficking. It feels super jarring when we kind of get out of them, and it's like, oh yeah, they'll talk about, because obviously these were shot later, and they'll talk about the sort of characters that were introduced in the bulk of the kind of the movie, but there's no real interconnective tissue in actual fact. It just has really nothing to kind of grip you in this movie. It's very similar in a way to the aforementioned Nest of Vampires, which was actually directed by Chris Sanders. Even though he didn't direct this one, it still feels like it's a very, very similar movie, and he was the producer. It's his production company, so I assume he's pretty hands-on here. You know, the Chinese-speaking Vampires, which was directed by Randy Kent, who directed this, wasn't a brilliant movie, but I think it had some kind of fun elements. But this one is just, it's pretty bad. Should you see this movie? There's very little to recommend. If I'm being completely honest, this could be done, I think, as a template for an idea for a future movie. I think the kind of the mob, you know, working with Satan is interesting, but not this movie. Is not particularly kind of a thrilling movie in any sense. It's slow. The dialogue is kind of is flat and kind of like uninspiring. Lots of exposition. Lots of kind of like characters that we never really kind of feel like we get to know. You know, quite laughable if we're actually actual horror scenes, if we're being completely honest. So it's a 3 out of 10 for me. Like I've said, you might want to watch it ironically. That's my best recommendation I can give. But this was a rough watch. 3 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think? Let's leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.